I used to think love was something you earned. That if I stayed quiet enough, polite enough, invisible enough, they would finally see me as theirs. But blood is louder than silence. And in the Monroe house, blood was everything. I was 8 when they brought me home. I remember the way Mrs. Monroe smiled at the cameras, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder, like I was a charity bracelet she wore for the season. Mr. Monroe didn't smile. He never did, not at me, anyway. But he smiled at Carter. He smiled at Lily. He smiled at everyone who shared his name by birth. I learned early that adoption was a word they used in public, and tolerated in private. They fed me, clothed me, gave me a room in the corner of the 3rd floor, far from everyone else. I had everything I needed and nothing I wanted. No birthday parties. No family photos on the mantle. No one who asked how my day was. When I graduated top of my class, they didn't come. When I got into Yale, Mrs. Monroe said, "Well, isn't that nice?" and turned back to her book. But when Carter barely scraped into a state school, they threw him a party. I stopped trying after that. And 20 years later, when I walked into that boardroom as the CEO they didn't know existed, I realized something. They never knew me at all. I was always the spare. Not the eldest. Not the favorite. Not even the backup plan, just the one they pulled out for appearances. The accessory child. The proof of their generosity. Our adopted daughter, Mrs. Monroe would say at galas, her voice sweet and distant, like I was a rescue dog she'd forgotten to name. She'd rest her hand on my shoulder for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for the cameras to click, short enough that it never felt real. I learned early that I was a performance. A role she played when it mattered. And the second the spotlight moved, so did her attention. At family dinners, I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table. Close enough to be included in the family portrait. Far enough to be forgotten in the conversation. Carter and Lily would talk about their days, school drama, weekend plans, friends I didn't know and wasn't invited to meet. Their voices filled the room like music I wasn't allowed to sing along to. I listened. I always listened. Because no one ever turned to me and asked, "What about you, Elena?" I used to try. I used to wait for a pause in the conversation, a gap I could slip into. But every time I opened my mouth, someone else was already speaking. And after a while, I stopped trying to be heard. I became a shadow at my own table. Mrs. Monroe would smile at Carter when he talked about failing his math test again. She'd laugh when Lily complained about a boy not texting her back. But when I won the regional essay competition in 7th grade, she didn't even look up from her wine. "That's nice, dear," she said. And that was it. I didn't exist unless it was convenient. When I was 12, I thought I could change that. I spent 3 weeks on a painting. A family portrait. I used every skill I'd taught myself from library books and YouTube videos. I painted the 4 of them in the garden. Mr. Monroe reading his newspaper. Mrs. Monroe in her sun hat. Carter laughing. Lily mid-spin in her favorite dress. I made them look like the family I wanted us to be. The family they pretended we were. I gave it to Mrs. Monroe on her birthday. She unwrapped it in front of guests. Smiled. Held it up for everyone to see. "How lovely," she said, her voice bright and hollow. I waited for more. For her to ask where I'd hang it. For her to say she loved it. But she just handed it to the housekeeper. "Margaret, would you mind putting this somewhere safe?" Somewhere safe. I found it a week later in the storage closet, shoved between old Christmas decorations and boxes labeled, "Donate." Face down. Covered in dust. I stood there in the dark, staring at it, my throat tight and my chest aching in a way I didn't have words for yet. That's when I realized, I wasn't part of this family. I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I wasn't their daughter. I was their charity case. Their good deed. The story they told at fundraisers to prove they were kind, generous people. But behind closed doors, I was nothing. So I stopped trying to belong. I stopped waiting for Mrs. Monroe to ask about my day. I stopped hoping Mr. Monroe would look at me the way he looked at Carter. I stopped trying to make Lily see me as a sister instead of an inconvenience. I disappeared into my room. Into my books. Into a future I built in my head. One where I didn't need their approval. Where I didn't need their love. I studied. I worked. I stayed out of their way. I became so quiet, they forgot I was there. And maybe that was easier for everyone. But late at night, when the house was silent and I was alone in my corner room on the 3rd floor, far from everyone else, always far, I made myself a promise. One day, I wouldn't need them. One day, I wouldn't be the spare. One day, I'd have something they could never take from me. Power. High school was worse. Because now I wasn't just invisible at home, I was invisible everywhere. Carter was the golden boy. Captain of the lacrosse team. Prom king. The kind of guy teachers loved even when he showed up late. Hungover. Reeking of last night's party. He failed tests and still got into a decent college because daddy made a call. Because the Monroe name opened doors that talent never had to. Everyone loved Carter. He had that effortless charm, the kind that made people overlook his mediocrity because he smiled while delivering it. Lily was the princess. Beautiful in that untouchable way. Long blonde hair, perfect skin, a closet full of designer everything. She got a brand new car for her 16th birthday, a white Mercedes with a bow on top. Mrs. Monroe posted about it on Instagram. Number blessed. The caption said, I got a used bike from a garage sale. Lily had a credit card with no limit. I had a part-time job at the campus library, shelving books for $8 an hour. When people at school asked if we were related, Lily would laugh this light, careless sound that made my stomach twist. She's adopted, she'd say, like that explained everything. And maybe it did. Because after that, people stopped asking. They stopped seeing me as part of the Monroe family. I became the adopted one. The outsider. The girl who didn't quite fit. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I didn't have friends who came over after school because I didn't want anyone to see the way I was treated in my own home. I didn't want them to see the empty seat at the dinner table, the second-hand clothes, the way my own family looked through me like I was glass. So I stayed away. I spent my nights in the public library, long after school ended. I read everything: fiction, history, business books, biographies of people who built something from nothing. I planned. I dreamed. I imagined a version of my life that had nothing to do with the Monroe name. One night, Mrs. Monroe found me in my room, surrounded by textbooks and scholarship applications. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between curious and annoyed. Why are you so serious all the time? She asked. I looked up at her. This woman who had raised me but never mothered me. This woman who smiled for the cameras and turned cold the second they were gone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how I was supposed to smile when no one in this house ever looked at me like I mattered. When I sat at the dinner table, like a ghost. When my own mother handed my painting to the housekeeper like it was trash. I wanted to ask her why she even adopted me if she was never going to love me. But I didn't. Because I'd learned by then that honesty wasn't welcome here. Emotion wasn't welcome here. So, I swallowed it all down. Buried it. Locked it away. I'm fine. I said. She stared at me for a moment, like she was trying to decide if I was lying. Then she shrugged. Well. Don't stay up too late. And she left. I sat there in the silence, staring at the closed door, my chest tight and my hands shaking. That's when I realized something. They didn't care if I was fine. They just wanted me to say I was. Because my feelings were inconvenient. My pain was inconvenient. I was inconvenient. So I made myself smaller. Quieter. I stopped crying. I stopped expecting anything. I went to school. I came home. I studied. I worked. And I disappeared. Not physically. But emotionally. I became a ghost in my own life. And no one noticed. Carter kept winning games. Lily kept posting selfies. Mrs. Monroe kept hosting charity luncheons and talking about family values. And I sat in my room on the 3rd floor, planning my escape. Because I knew deep in my bones that if I stayed, I would disappear completely. So I decided to leave before they could erase me entirely. I left the day after graduation. No party. No cap and gown photos on the mantle. No teary goodbyes. Just a duffel bag, a train ticket, and a heart that had stopped hoping a long time ago. I packed in the middle of the night. My room was small, bare, mostly unchanged from the day I moved in. There were no posters on the walls, no photos, no memories I wanted to take with me. Just books, clothes, and a single notebook full of plans I'd been writing since I was 15. I zipped the bag. Took one last look around. And I walked out. The house was silent. Everyone was asleep. Carter in his massive bedroom with the king-sized bed and the flat-screen TV. Lily in hers, her closet full of things she'd worn once and forgotten. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe in their master suite, behind double doors I was never allowed to knock on. I didn't leave a note. What would I even say? Thank you for the roof over my head and the reminder that I was never really home. I slipped out the side door, the one that didn't creak, and walked to the train station in the dark. The ticket I'd bought with money I saved from tutoring jobs was clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I just left. Mrs. Monroe didn't notice I was gone until dinner the next night. I know because my friend Jenna told me later. She said Mrs. Monroe glanced at my empty seat and frowned. Where's Elena? Carter shrugged. Lily didn't even look up from her phone. Probably studying somewhere, Lily said. And that was it. No one called. No one texted. No one came looking for me. I stayed with Jenna and her family for 2 weeks. Her mom didn't ask too many questions. She just made me a plate at dinner and told me I was welcome as long as I needed. It was the first time in years someone made space for me without making me feel like I was taking up too much of it. When my acceptance letter to Yale came, I cried for the first time in months. Not because I was sad. Because I was free. I moved into my dorm at the end of August. It was small, cramped, shared with a roommate I barely knew. But it was mine. No one could take it from me. No one could make me feel small in it. I worked 3 jobs to pay for everything the scholarship didn't cover. I waitressed. I tutored. I cleaned lecture halls at 6 a.m. before my first class. I lived on ramen, dollar pizza, and spite. And I thrived. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the adopted kid. I wasn't the spare. I wasn't invisible. I was just Elena. And Elena was brilliant. I threw myself into my classes. Economics. Business strategy. Finance. I absorbed everything like I was making up for lost time. I joined student organizations. I networked. I built relationships with professors who saw potential in me, not pity. People here didn't care that I came from nothing. They cared about what I could do. And I could do a lot. I graduated summa cum laude. The day I walked across that stage, cap and gown and honors cords, I scanned the crowd. Not because I expected them to be there. But because part of me, the part I hated, still hoped. They weren't. But I didn't need them. I got into Harvard Business School. Full ride. The acceptance letter felt like vindication. Like proof that I was worth something, even if they never saw it. I didn't call home to tell them. They didn't call me to ask. It was easier that way. Or so I told myself. But late at night, when my roommate was asleep and the city outside was quiet, I'd lie awake and wonder. Did they ever think about me? Did they ever regret the way they treated me? Did Mrs. Monroe ever walk past my empty room and feel anything? Did Carter ever mention my name? Did Lily ever wonder where I went? Or was I just gone? Erased. Like I'd never been there at all. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was better off. I told myself I didn't need their love, their approval, their acknowledgement. But the truth? The truth was that no matter how far I ran, no matter how much I accomplished, I still felt like the spare. 10 years later, I wasn't just surviving. I was untouchable. I'd climbed every ladder they said I couldn't. I'd shattered every glass ceiling they pretended didn't exist. I built a name for myself in the tech world, a name that had nothing to do with Monroe and everything to do with me. Elena Harlow. CEO. Founder. Innovator. I'd started my own company at 28, with nothing but a laptop, a business plan, and a relentless refusal to fail. Harlow Industries became one of the fastest growing tech firms in the country. We developed software that revolutionized supply chain logistics. We had clients in 12 countries. Billionaire investors. A team of 200 people who respected me not because of my last name, but because I earned it. At 32, I stood in a corner office on the 45th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My city. I bought a penthouse in Tribeca. Minimalist. Modern. Nothing like the suffocating Victorian mansion I grew up in. I drove a car that cost more than the Monroe house. I wore power like a second skin. I had everything I ever wanted. Except closure. Because even after all these years, even after all my success, I still carried the weight of being unwanted. I still heard Lily's voice in my head. Casual and cruel. She's adopted. I still saw Mrs. Monroe's indifferent smile the day she handed my painting to the housekeeper. I still felt like the girl at the end of the table. The spare. The afterthought. No matter how many deals I closed, how many zeros appeared in my bank account, how many times my name appeared in Forbes, I couldn't shake it. The feeling that I wasn't enough. That I never was. My therapist said it was trauma. That I needed to process it. That success wouldn't heal the wounds they left. But I didn't want to process it. I wanted to bury it. So I worked. I built. I expanded. I became the kind of woman people wrote articles about. The kind of CEO other CEOs wanted to meet. I gave keynote speeches. I sat on panels. I mentored young women who reminded me of myself, hungry, brilliant, underestimated. I did everything right. And still, late at night, when I was alone in my penthouse with a glass of wine and the city lights below, I felt empty. Then one afternoon, my assistant walked into my office. "Miss Harlow, this came for you." She placed an envelope on my desk. Heavy cardstock. Gold embossing. I frowned. "What is it?" "A gall invitation." I picked it up, barely interested. I got dozens of these a week. Charity events. Fundraisers. Networking dinners. But then I saw the name. The Monroe Foundation Annual Charity Event. My heart stopped. I stared at the card, my fingers trembling slightly. The Monroe Foundation. The same foundation that hosted events every year to raise money for underserved children. The same foundation Mrs. Monroe ran, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, pretending to care. The same foundation that never gave a damn about the underserved child living under their roof. I hadn't thought about them in years. Not really. I'd buried them. Moved on. Built a life so far removed from theirs that they felt like ghosts. But now, holding this invitation, they were real again. And something inside me shifted. My assistant was still standing there, waiting. Miss Harlow? Should I RSVP? I looked up at her. And for the first time in a decade I smiled. Not the polite smile I used in meetings. Not the controlled, professional smile I gave investors. A real smile. Sharp. Cold. Certain. Yes, I said quietly. Tell them I'll be there. She nodded and left. I sat alone in my office, staring at the invitation, my mind racing. They had no idea who I was now. They hadn't kept track, hadn't followed my career, hadn't Googled my name. To them, I was still the quiet, forgettable girl who disappeared after high school. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was Elena Harlow. And it was time they knew it. I leaned back in my chair, the city sprawling below me, and let the satisfaction settle in my chest. They wanted me at their event. Fine. I'd give them a show they'd never forget. I wore red. Not because it was elegant. Not because it was trendy. Because it was a warning. The dress was custom made. Valentino. Silk that clung in all the right places and flowed where it mattered. It cost more than Mrs. Monroe spent on Lily's Sweet 16. I wore my hair down, sleek and straight. Diamond earrings, real ones. A Cartier bracelet that caught the light every time I moved. I looked like money. Like power. Like someone you didn't forget. The ballroom was exactly as I remembered. Crystal chandeliers. Champagne towers. People in expensive clothes, pretending to care about charity while networking for their own benefit. The same polished floors. The same string quartet playing in the corner. The same hollow elegance. I walked in alone. No date. No entourage. I didn't need one. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Is that Elena Monroe? I thought I heard she's a CEO now. Harlow Industries, right? God, she looks incredible. I smiled. Let them talk. I moved through the crowd slowly, deliberately, my heels clicking against the marble floor. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter but didn't drink it. I just held it. A prop. And then I saw them. Center of the room. Right where they always were. Mrs. Monroe in pearls and a pale blue gown that looked expensive but outdated. Mr. Monroe in his usual navy suit, salt and pepper hair slicked back. The same detached expression he always wore. Carter stood beside them, thicker around the middle now, hairline receding, laughing too loudly at someone's joke. And Lily. Still pretty, but tired. The kind of tired that makeup couldn't quite cover. Her dress was designer, but it didn't fit her the way it used to. She looked diminished. They hadn't seen me yet. I walked toward them. Slow and steady. My heart pounding but my face calm. When I was 5 feet away, Mrs. Monroe glanced up. Her smile froze. Her champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. Elena. Her voice was small. Uncertain. The people around them turned. Stared. I stopped. Smiled. Cool. Controlled. Unshakable. Hello, mother. The word tasted bitter. Like ash. But I said it anyway. Because I wanted her to hear it. I wanted her to feel the weight of it. Carter blinked, his face slack with confusion. Wait, you're here? I was invited. I said smoothly, my voice even. I'm one of the keynote speakers tonight. Silence. Mr. Monroe cleared his throat, his jaw tight. Well. That's unexpected. I turned to him. Met his eyes. Held his gaze. So was being forgotten. The words hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Monroe's face went pale. Lily shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in her phone. Carter tried to laugh it off. Come on, Elena. That's not what? I interrupted. My voice soft but sharp. Not true. He faltered. I smiled again. But this time. It wasn't friendly. You didn't come to my high school graduation. You didn't call when I got into Yale. You didn't ask where I was for 10 years. Mrs. Monroe reached out. Her hand hovering near my arm but not quite touching. Elena. Sweetheart. We don't. She froze. I stepped back, just enough to make it clear. I wasn't theirs to touch. Not anymore. I'm not here for a reunion, I said quietly. I'm here to give a speech. That's all. And then, before they could respond, someone called my name from the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker Elena Harlow, CEO of Harlow Industries. Applause rippled through the room. I didn't look back at them. I just turned. Walked toward the stage. Let them watch. Let them see what I became without them. Let them realize what they lost. They tried to recover. As I walked past, Mrs. Monroe touched my arm lightly, desperately. We're so proud of you, darling. I stopped. Looked down at her hand. Then at her face. Her smile was forced, fragile. I pulled my arm away. Are you? She blinked, caught off guard. Of course. I tilted my head, studying her. Funny. You didn't seem proud when I graduated high school. Or college. Or business school. Her mouth opened. Closed. No words came out. Lily shifted beside her, uncomfortable. Elena, come on. I turned to her. Come on, what? She hesitated. You're making this uncomfortable. I finished. Good. Carter stepped forward, his face flushed. That's not fair. You're the one who left. I laughed. It came out cold. Sharp. A sound I didn't recognize as my own. I left because I was never really here. The words hit like glass breaking. Mrs. Monroe flinched. Mr. Monroe's jaw tightened. Carter looked away. And then someone from the event staff called my name again, louder this time. Miss Harlow? We're ready for you. I looked at them one last time. My family. The people who raised me but never loved me. Excuse me, I said softly. And I walked away. The stage lights were bright. Blinding. But I didn't flinch. I took the microphone. Stood at the podium. Looked out at the sea of faces. Hundreds of people. Donors. Socialites. Journalists. And somewhere in the crowd them. I didn't look for them. I didn't need to. I knew they were watching. I took a breath. And I began. Good evening. My name is Elena Harlow, and I'm the CEO of Harlow Industries. But that's not why I'm here tonight. I paused. Let the room settle. I'm here because this foundation says it cares about underserved children. About giving kids opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. About making sure no child is left behind. I smiled. But it didn't reach my eyes. And I want to talk about what that really means. I didn't mention them by name. I didn't have to. I talked about what it's like to grow up in a house where you're fed but not loved. Where you have a roof over your head but no place to call home. Where you're included in the family photo but erased from the family story. I talked about being treated like a guest. Like charity. Like proof of someone else's goodness. I talked about what it feels like to be forgotten. To be unwanted. To be invisible. The room was silent. Absolutely silent. I was one of those kids. I said quietly. I was adopted into a wealthy family. I had every material thing I could need. But I didn't have the one thing that mattered. I paused. I didn't have a family. I could feel the shift in the room. The discomfort. The realization. So when we talk about helping underserved children, let's be honest. It's not just about money. It's not just about resources. It's about seeing them. Hearing them. Treating them like they matter. I looked out at the crowd. And for just a second I let my eyes find them. Mrs. Monroe. Mr. Monroe. Carter. Lily. They were frozen. Pale. Staring at me like they'd seen a ghost. Good. Because the kids you ignore today will become the adults you can't ignore tomorrow. I smiled. Thank you. The room erupted. Applause. Standing ovation. People on their feet, clapping, some wiping their eyes. I stood there, microphone in hand, letting the sound wash over me. I didn't look back at them. I didn't need to. After the gala, they tried to reach me. Emails. Voicemails. Messages through mutual acquaintances. Mrs. Monroe wanted to reconnect. Carter wanted to catch up. Lily sent a long, rambling text at 2 a.m. about how family is complicated, and we all make mistakes. I deleted every single one. Because here's the truth they didn't want to admit. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that stayed quiet. That didn't make waves. That made them look good. But that version of me was dead. A few weeks later, my lawyer called. Elena, you're going to want to hear this. I leaned back in my office chair, staring out at the city. Go ahead. The Monroe Foundation is in trouble. Financial mismanagement. A donor pulled out after some discrepancies in their books. The press is starting to ask questions. I was quiet for a moment. Then I smiled. Good. There's more, he said. Word is they're looking for a bailout. And your name came up. I laughed. Of course it did. What do you want me to do? Nothing. If they want to talk to me, they can come themselves. He paused. You think they will? I know they will. I was right. 2 days later, my assistant buzzed me. Miss Harlow, there's a Mr. Monroe here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. I looked up from my laptop. Felt my pulse quicken. Send him in. The door opened, and there he was. Mr. Monroe. Older now. Grayer. Smaller. Somehow. Like the years had shrunk him. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking around my office like he couldn't quite believe it was mine. Elena. I didn't stand. Didn't smile. Mr. Monroe. He flinched. Just slightly. You can call me. I know what I can call you. I interrupted. What do you want? He cleared his throat. Stepped inside. Sat down across from me without asking. I'll get to the point. The foundation is in trouble. I heard. We need help. I waited. He shifted. Uncomfortable. We need a financial partner. Someone who? Someone with money. I finished. Someone like me. He nodded. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. And why would I help you? Because we're family. The word made my chest tighten. But I didn't let it show. Family, I repeated slowly. That's interesting. He frowned. Elena. You didn't treat me like family. His face darkened. We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me a room. You gave me food. You gave me a last name I never wanted. I stood. Walked around the desk. Stopped in front of him. But you never gave me what I needed. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Regret. Shame. I didn't care. I'm asking for help, he said quietly. I know. And. I smiled. Cold. Final. No. His face went red. You'd let the foundation collapse? Out of spite. No, I said. Out of justice. I walked to the door. Opened it. You're dismissed. He stood. Shaking. Elena. Get out. He stared at me. Then, slowly, he left. I closed the door behind him. And I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The rain came without warning that Tuesday afternoon, drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office like 1,000 urgent fingertips. I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the manila envelope that had been delivered an hour ago, its edges worn, its weight impossibly heavy for something made of paper. The private investigator's number was scribbled on a yellow post-it note stuck to the front. I'd hired him 3 years ago, then forgotten about him. Or, maybe I'd forced myself to forget. Hope, I'd learned, was a dangerous thing to carry when you'd spent your entire life unwanted. But he'd found something. Someone. My hands trembled as I pulled out the contents. Photographs spilled across the polished mahogany surface, candid shots of a woman with dark hair and soft eyes, standing outside a modest brick house with flower boxes in the windows. She was laughing in one photo, her head thrown back, her hand clutching a paintbrush. In another, she sat at a cafe with 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl, their faces bright with the kind of easy affection I'd only ever seen from a distance. The investigator's report was clinical. Detached. But every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Grace Elena Hartwell. Age 48. Writer. Painter. Mother of 2. Mother of 3, I thought bitterly. She just didn't get to keep the first one. I read faster, my vision blurring as the truth unraveled itself in stark, unforgiving sentences. The Monroes had adopted me through a private agency, the kind that operated in the shadows, where money talked louder than ethics. My mother had been 19. Alone. Pressured by her family. By circumstance. By a world that told her she wasn't enough. She'd signed the papers with ink and tears. And then she'd spent 29 years trying to undo it. The report detailed everything. The police reports she'd filed. The lawyers she'd hired. The dead ends and closed doors. She'd never stopped. Even when the trail went cold. Even when everyone told her to move on. She never stopped looking for me. I pressed my palms flat against the desk, trying to steady myself. But the room tilted anyway. All this time, every lonely birthday, every hollow Christmas, every moment I'd convinced myself I was unlovable, she'd been out there. Searching. Mourning a daughter she'd never forgotten. The Monroes had lied. About everything. I wasn't unwanted. I was stolen. The sob came without permission, raw and guttural, ripping out of my chest like something feral. I covered my mouth with both hands, but it didn't matter. The dam had broken. Years of grief and rage and longing poured out in violent, shaking waves. How many nights had I lain awake as a child, wondering what was wrong with me? How many times had I tried to earn love from people who never had any to give? She'd been looking for me. She'd never forgotten. I don't know how long I sat there, drowning in the wreckage of a truth I'd never expected to find. The rain kept falling. The city blurred into watercolor through the glass. And somewhere, 2 hours away, a woman I'd never met was living a life that should have included me. I picked up my phone with shaking hands. Her number was listed in the report. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. What do you say to someone who gave you life, then lost you? How do you bridge a gap carved by decades of absence? What if she doesn't want to hear from me now? But that fear felt small compared to the ache of not knowing. I dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then a voice, soft, hesitant, threaded with something fragile, answered. Hello. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat had closed around all the words I'd rehearsed. All the careful things I'd planned to say. There was a pause. Then, quieter. Almost afraid. Elena. The sound of my name in her voice shattered me. My voice cracked. Broke. Yes. A choked sound came through the line. Half gasp, half sob. Oh my God. Oh my God, it's you. It's really you. Tears streamed down my face, hot and relentless. I pressed the phone so hard against my ear it hurt. I'm sorry, she whispered, her words tumbling over each other, desperate and raw. I'm so sorry. I tried, Elena. I tried so hard to find you. Every day. Every single day. I never stopped. I know. My voice was barely a whisper. I know you did. She was crying now, full and unrestrained, and I could hear her struggling to breathe through it. I thought about you every birthday. Every holiday. I wondered what you looked like. If you were happy. If you. Her voice broke. If you hated me. I don't hate you, I said, and it was the truest thing I'd ever spoken. For a long time, neither of us said anything. We just cried together. 2 strangers bound by blood and loss and all the years we'd been kept apart. Can I? She hesitated, her voice fragile. Can I see you? I closed my eyes, letting the rain and her voice wash over me. Yes, I whispered. And for the first time in my life, through all the wealth, all the power, all the hollow victories, I felt something I'd never thought I'd feel. I felt like I belonged. Grace's house smelled like lavender and old books. I stood on her doorstep a week later, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack through my ribs. The flower boxes I'd seen in the photographs were even more vibrant in person, bright geraniums spilling over the edges like wild, hopeful color. The door opened before I could knock. And there she was. She had my eyes. The same storm gray shade that had always looked wrong on me, like I'd borrowed them from someone else. But on her, they looked like home. Her hair was streaked with silver, pulled back in a loose braid. Her hands paint-stained, trembling, reached for me like I was made of glass. Like she was afraid that if she blinked, I'd disappear again. Elena. She breathed. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Tears already blurring my vision. She pulled me into her arms, and I collapsed into her. She smelled like jasmine and turpentine and something else, something warm and achingly familiar that I couldn't name but had been missing my entire life. I never forgot you. She whispered against my hair, her voice breaking. Not once. Not for a single second. I believed her. Because you can't fake the way someone holds you when they've spent 3 decades mourning your absence. Inside, the house was small but overflowing with life. Paintings lined every wall, abstract swirls of color, landscapes that looked like dreams, portraits of people I didn't recognize but felt connected to anyway. Books were stacked in precarious towers. A cat, orange and indignant, watched me from the back of the couch. And then there were my siblings. Emma was 17, all long limbs and shy smiles. James was 14, brash and curious in the way only teenage boys can be. They stared at me like I was a ghost. You're really our sister? Emma asked softly. I guess I am. I said, my voice unsteady. James grinned. That's so cool. Do you, own a bunch of companies? Grace swatted his arm gently. James, don't. It's okay. I said, laughing through my tears. Yeah. I do. That's awesome. He said, eyes wide. But Emma just stepped forward and hugged me. No questions. No hesitation. Just acceptance. And something inside me, something that had been frozen for 29 years, finally thawed. We spent the day together. Talking. Laughing until our sides hurt. Crying when the stories got too heavy. Grace told me about the years she'd spent searching, the doors that had been slammed in her face, the way she'd refused to give up, even when everyone told her to let go. She showed me the letters she'd written to me, dozens of them, never sent because she didn't know where I was. Letters for every birthday. Every milestone. Every moment she'd missed. I read them that night, curled up in her guest room, and wept until there was nothing left. 3 months later, I stood in front of the Harlow Industries board of directors and resigned. Not because I'd failed. Not because I was weak. But because I'd finally realized that success without peace was just another form of captivity. I started a foundation in Grace's name, one that helped adopted children find their birth families. That fought for transparency in adoption agencies. That made sure no other child would be stolen the way I was. The Monroes? They faded into irrelevance like smoke. Carter works in middle management now, bitterness etched into every line of his face. Lily married someone richer and crueler than she ever was. Mrs. Monroe sends a card every Christmas, written in her perfect, emotionless script. I don't open them. Because they were never my family. Grace is. Emma is. James is. And the life I'm building now rooted in love, not ambition. That's my legacy.